How do you make a shot more cinematic? Well, strong composition is your strongest ally. Okay, but how do you improve composition in your film? Hi everyone, welcome back. I thought today was a good idea to share some tips on how to improve your composition for storyboarding and filming in general. I know these kind of videos usually keep the best for last so that you watch until the end, but I'm sure you're gonna stick around anyway because you want to see the examples and hear the great quotes from famous directors. So I'm gonna tell you my favorite trick right away. But first, if you enjoy this kind of video, you wanna help me grow the channel, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It really helps a ton as it pushes YouTube to suggest this video to other people like you. So what's the big secret? What helped me so much, especially at the beginning of my career? Let's check it out. The first thing I like to have in my file is a folder called Grid, where I keep two different layers. I will talk later about the one at the bottom of the frame. For now, let's just talk about the actual grid. The rule of thirds is probably one of the most well-known composition rules. And to sum it up quickly, just imagine dividing the image by two equal horizontal lines and two equal vertical lines. This so-called rule suggests that placing the most important elements in the intersection of any of these four lines creates a more pleasing image. However, the more you start studying films looking through this grid, the more you start realizing that there are other elements to a pleasing composition. And as Joseph Mascelli says in his classic The 5 C's of Cinematography, because composition involves artistic taste, emotional awareness, personal like, dislike, experience, and background of the individual cameraman, strict rules cannot be applied. While composing a scene is not a mechanical process, certain mathematical and geometrical factors may help ensure success. This means that even if good composition is not completely teachable, there are some guidelines that can help improve it. And while there are many elements you can use to improve a composition, I found personally that a grid to check on the rule of third is something that helped me improve my composition at the beginning of my career. And of course, over time, it's going to become second nature and you're going to use it less and less often. Now let's use this grid to study a scene from Catch Me If You Can. But first, I want to let you know that I'm also starting a newsletter that collects news and updates from the storytelling world. It is not a regular newsletter. I'm only sending it out when there is information that adds value to our community. So if you want to sign up for a not spamming newsletter, the link is in the description. Back to the video. The scene we're about to watch is from Catch Me If You Can, as I said. And specifically, this is the scene where he pretends to be a teacher.
You freaking killed him! You selling encyclopedias?
Yeah, it looks like a substitute teacher.
No, fine now. Take it.
I don't want you to just go ahead.
Here you go.
Let's analyze it. So this scene is when DiCaprio decides to impersonate the teacher. And we need a bit of a backstory. As we cut to a close-up of this character, we need to know that actually he was a bully who was giving a hard time to DiCaprio in the hallways when the bully thought that DiCaprio was a student. Now we have him walk into the back of the room, asking for order and for everybody to sit down. And we're gonna notice that as people start sitting down, in the establishing shot, we're not going to have anyone in the foreground.
Excuse me, people, if I need to ask again, I'm going to write up the entire class. Take your seats!
When we cut, we have this character in the foreground. It's not supposed to be there. Yet it works because the general flow of the crowd sitting down is kept. And compositionally, we have this nice contrast between DiCaprio being still in the center of the image while people keep flowing, moving left and right in front of him. And now we have this feeling of cinematographic depth created by the fact that DiCaprio is moving from far away close to camera. And the composition change when he's grabbing the bully, then we cut in action and compositionally we keep them occupying the right side of the screen in both shots. And in this new shot we can see composition in motion again. DiCaprio walks away from us and circles around to end up close to camera. It creates depth and it also gives the sense of a predator circling around the prey. Quite a switch in roles. And here we are not cutting close to the bully nor to DiCaprio, because Spielberg is highlighting the relationship between the characters. We then have a balanced establishment. And now we are again thrown off balance by the entrance of an unexpected character.
They said they needed a sub for Roberta. I came all the way from Dixon.
In old TV, we probably would have a close-up of the lady or DiCaprio to see their expression as they talk. But here we create depth and establish a relationship between the character with an over-the-shoulder. We can see the student reaction in the background as well as DiCaprio reaction. Now we do cut to a single shot of the lady as we want to focus on her reaction.
You tell them not to call me. What do they think? It's easy for a woman my age and all the money that it costs to travel? I tell you, they don't give a damn.
This is the first time we do it, as it is the first time we absolutely want to see her expression up close. The other way to make your sequence more cinematographic and with better composition is to think about the relationship between the characters on screen. We have seen it a bit in the previous example, but let's look at these two shots and how they connect. We start with a shot of a man asking to someone, "Do you know who hate this?" Then we cut to a guilty looking dog. These two shots work, but they just describe the events without adding much. Now let's redo this scene by shooting the owner in an upshot. "Do you know who hate this?" We are already enhancing the storytelling by suggesting that this character is dominating. Then we cut to the guilty looking dog, but in a down shot, again adding the feeling of a guilty character. So changing the camera angle and the composition give us additional subtext. But still, these two shots are what you would probably find in an old-style TV show or maybe a preschool. To make it more cinematographic and adding more to the visual storytelling, we can do something like this. "Do you know who hate this?" These give us on-screen interaction, having the owner's hand, the evidence, and the culprit all in the same frame give us a lot of information about the relationship between these elements. We can now decide to tweak our storytelling, for example by delaying for a second the reveal of the guilty party. This is to say the composition can really improve once you think about what kind of relationship you want to portray on screen. Not every composition works for every story moment. Now let's go back to the grid folder and to this thing at the bottom. Who are they? They are your audience sitting in the darkness of the theater watching the film you helped make. If you are working for the small screen, they are not really useful. But if you are boarding for the big screen, you often underestimate how big things are once projected, especially at the beginning of your career. Let's look at this shot. Now at the audience. That is a damn big cookie. So I would probably scale it down a bit to something like this. Similar use can have the so-called safety area. Back in the days was used to avoid that key elements will be cut out by the physical frames around TV screens. But they are still useful to make sure that important parts of the story read clearly. If you move things too much to the edge, audience might have a hard time to see it. Plus, it's often bad composition. Still, are these absolute rules? No. You can put things close to the edge of the screen if you have a reason to. Same thing is true for the cookie example. You can make it as big as you want if there is a reason to emphasize it in that way. You just need to be aware of these guidelines because putting things on the edge of the screen or make things too big are extreme choices and you might lose your audience by doing it. So when you make that decision, you just need to be conscious that what you have in mind might not work. And last, I want to encourage you to keep in mind that we are working in a media based on sequential images. This means that we have to remember that images by themselves might have a different meaning or impact compared to when they are in sequence. And on these, I'm going to quote two great directors. The first is Yasujiro Ozu, director of Tokyo Story. The book I'm going to be referring to is actually in Italian. I'm going to be translating the quote in English for you. And it's a collection of interviews and essay Ozu wrote about cinema. In it, he says, "When I feel I can make a moment more expressive with the long shot, in order to enhance it, I put a series of consecutive close-up before it. Yet these close-ups don't have the function of emphasizing anything in particular. They are just there to make the long shot stand out more." So this is the idea of storytelling through contrast. The other director is Sidney Lumet, director of 12 Angry Men, and I'm taking this quote from his book, Making Movies, that he wrote. In it, he tells about his experience making movies and kind of makes a guide on how to make movies through his own experience. By the way, if you want to read any of the book mentioned in this video, I'm gonna leave a link to each one of them in the description down below and you can buy them from there. In it, Lumet says, "To me, there are two main elements to editing: juxtapositioning images and creating tempo." And, like Ozu, he goes into detail about storytelling through contrast. In the agonizing, soul-bearing fights in Long Day's Journey into Night, the shots kept getting wider and wider as father and son found themselves telling each other the cruel, ugly truth about each other. At the culmination of the fight, two extreme close-ups ended the scene. The frames were so tight, the foreheads and chins were lost. The impact of the close-ups was double because of the wide shots that had preceded them. You know, especially at the beginning of one's career, there is a tendency to choose great camera angles or scenes without looking at the bigger picture. We are not focusing on how images will cut with each other. We can bring our skills to the next level only when we can see the sequence or the film as a whole. A great example is being able to choose a sequence of shots that won't undermine the climax of our sequence, which often means giving up sensational camera angles in favor of effective storytelling. There are definitely other components to create great composition, and you can leave a comment down below if you want me to talk about them in future videos, or suggest a topic you want to hear more about. For now, let's go tell stories to the world.